Hello, 11th graders. Hey, I'm using my other phone. Actually, it's my old phone. I don't use it much anymore, but it's got a lot more storage on it. So I'm using that to record, okay? So I hope this to be one of two recordings. I wanted to get more done this morning, but I read for another class, and I had a little problem downloading onto YouTube. But we got that squared away. So here's the first of, I hope, two readings for this afternoon. I'm going to pick up at page 218. We got to 219 in class reading yesterday, but I want to back up just a little bit. This is Max has arrived, and he slept for 3 days in Liesel's room, and then he stayed downstairs, and they discovered it was so cold they just couldn't keep him down there at night. So he now sleeps up in the living room by the fireplace, and then goes back down during the day. So he has to stay in hiding all day long. Okay. I want to back up just a little bit, the instance where they're talking around the fire one night, and Rosa is not in the room, but it's a nice little conversation. On 218, I want to pick up there and keep going from there. One evening, Hans, Max, and Liesel were sitting in front of the fire. Mama was in the kitchen. Max was reading Mein Kampf again. You know something, Hans said. He leaned toward the fire. Liesel's actually a good little reader herself. Max lowered the book. And she has more in common with you than you might think. Papa checked that Rosa wasn't coming. She likes a good fist fight, too. Papa! Liesel, at the high end of 11 and still rake skinny as she sat against the wall, was devastated. I've never been in a fight. Shh, Papa laughed. He waved at her to keep her voice down and tilted again, this time to the girl. Well, what about the hiding you gave Ludwig Schmeichel, huh? I never... She was caught. Further denial was useless. How did you find out about that? I saw his papa at the Knoller. Liesel held her face in her hands. Once uncovered again, she asked the pivotal question. Did you tell Mama? Are you kidding? He winked at Max and whispered to the girl. You're still alive, aren't you? That night was also the first time Papa played his accordion at home for months. It lasted half an hour or so until he asked the question of Max. Did you learn? The face in the corner watched the flames. I did. There was a considerable pause. Until I was 9. At that age, my mother sold the music studio and stopped teaching. She kept only the one instrument, but gave up on me not long after I resisted the learning. I was foolish. No, Papa said, you were a boy. During the nights, both Liesel Memminger and Max Vandenberg would go about their other similarity. In their separate rooms, they would dream their nightmares and wake up, one with a scream in drowning sheets, the other with a gasp for air next to a smoking fire. Sometimes when Liesel was reading with Papa close to 3 o'clock, they would both hear the waking moment of Max. He dreams like you, Papa would say. And on one occasion, stirred by the sound of Max's anxiety, Liesel decided to get out of bed. From listening to his history, she had a good idea of what he saw in those dreams, if not the exact part of the story that paid him a visit each night. She made her way quietly down the hallway and into the living and bedroom. Max? The whisper was soft, clouded in the throat of sleep. To begin with, there was no sound of reply, but he soon sat up and searched the darkness. With Papa still in her bedroom, Liesel sat on the other side of the fireplace from Max. Behind them, Mama loudly slept. She gave the snorter on the train a good run for her money. Rosa, it sounds like Rosa that she would snore when she's sleeping, okay? The fire was nothing now but a funeral of smoke, dead and dying simultaneously. On this particular morning, there were also voices. The swapping of nightmares. The girl. Tell me, what do you see when you dream like that? The Jew. I see myself turning around and waving goodbye. The girl. I also have nightmares. The Jew. What do you see? The girl. A train and my dead brother. The Jew. Your brother? The girl. He died when I moved here, on the way. The girl and the Jew together. Yes. It would be nice to say that after this small breakthrough, neither Liesel nor Max dreamed their bad visions again. It would be nice, but untrue. The nightmares arrived like they always did, much like the best player in the opposition when you've heard rumors that he might be injured or sick, but there he is, warming up with the rest of them, ready to take the field. Or like a timetabled train arriving at a nightly platform, pulling the memories behind it in on a rope. A lot of dragging, a lot of awkward bounces. The only thing that changed was that Liesel told her papa that she should be old enough now to cope on her own with the dreams. For a moment he looked a little hurt, but as always with papa, he gave the right thing to say his best shot. Well, thank God, he halfway grinned. At least now I can get some proper sleep. That chair was killing me. He put his arm around the girl, and they walked to the kitchen. Now, isn't that interesting? He looked a little hurt. He liked caring for her. He liked being there for her. And if she's to the point now she thinks she can be on her own, that's a good thing. But I can see why he's a little hurt and a little sad. As time progressed, a clear distinction developed between two very different worlds: the world inside 33 Himmel Street, and the world that resided and turned outside it. The trick was to keep them apart. In the outside world, Liesel was learning to find some more of its uses. One afternoon, when she was walking home with an empty washing bag, she noticed a newspaper poking out of a garbage can, the weekly edition of the Molking Express. She lifted it out and took it home, presenting it to Max. I thought, she told him, you might like to do the crossword to pass the time. Max appreciated the gesture, and to justify her bringing it home, he read the paper from cover to cover and showed her the puzzle a few hours later, completed, but for one word. Damn, that's 17 down, he said. In February 1941, for her 12th birthday, Liesel received another used book, and she was grateful. It was called The Mud Men, and was about a very strange father and son. She hugged her mama and papa, while Max stood uncomfortably in the corner. Alles Gute zum Geburtstag, he smiled weakly. All the best for your birthday. His hands were in his pockets. I didn't know, or else I could have given you something. A blatant lie. He had nothing to give, except maybe Mein Kampf, and there was no way he'd give such propaganda to a young German girl. That would be like the lamb handing a knife to the butcher. There was an uncomfortable silence. She had embraced Mama and Papa. Mac looked so alone. Liesel swallowed. As she walked over and hugged him for the first time. Thanks, Max. At first he merely stood there, but as she held on to him, gradually his hands rose up and gently pressed into her shoulder blades. Only later would she find out about the helpless expression on Max Vandenberg's face. She would also discover that he resolved at that moment to give her something back. I often imagined him lying awake all that night, pondering what he could possibly offer. As it turned out, the gift he was delivered on paper just over a week later. He would bring it to her in the early hours of morning before retreating down the concrete steps to what he now liked to call home. Pages from the basement. For a week, Liesel was kept in the basement at all cost. It was Mama and Papa who made sure to take down Max's food. No, Samench, Mama told her each time she volunteered. There was always a new excuse. How about you do something useful in here for a change, like finish the ironing? You think carrying it around town is so special? Try ironing it. You can do all manner of underhanded nice things when you have a caustic reputation. It worked. During the week, Max had cut out a collection of pages from Mein Kampf and painted over them in white. He then hung them up with pegs on some string from one end of the basement to the other. When they were all dry, the hard part began. He was educated well enough to get by, but he was certainly no writer and no artist. Despite this, he formulated the words in his head till he could recount them without error. Only then, on the paper that he had bubbled and humped under the press of a drying paint, did he begin to write the story. It was done with a small black paintbrush. Interesting. So he took Mein Kampf, took it apart page by page, painted over the pages so that he now has paper to write on. He's going to create a gift. The Standover Man. He calculated that he needed 13 pages, so he painted 40, expecting at least twice expecting twice as many slip-ups as successes. There were practice versions on the pages of the Mulking Express, improving his basic, clumsy artwork to a level he could accept. As he worked, he heard the whispered words of the girl. His hair, she told him, is like feathers. Remember she'd said that earlier? She said that about him, and he remembered that she thinks of his hair like feathers. So now he used that feather imagery to write his book as a bird. When he was finished, he used a knife to pierce the pages and tie them with string. The result was a 13-page booklet that went like this. You can see the pictures in your book. All my life I've been scared of men standing over me. And you can see that image of a kind of a hawkish-looking bird standing over. I suppose my first standover man was my father, but he vanished before I could remember him. That was his father, who played the accordion and had been a friend of course, Hans in World War I. For some reason, when I was a boy, I liked to fight. A lot of the time, I lost. Another boy, sometimes with blood falling from his nose, would be standing over me. Standover man. There's that idea again. They're depicted as birds still. That's really interesting. But he's now the one bending on the ground. Many years later, I needed to hide. I tried not to sleep because I was afraid of who might be there when I woke up. But I was lucky. It was always my friend. Somebody there bringing him food in the darkness. When I was hiding, I dreamed of a certain man. The hardest was when I traveled to find him. So now he's showing himself reading Mein Kampf on the train, and that lady who's snoring is sitting next to him. Out of sheer luck and many footsteps, I made it. So there we have him coming to the door at 33 Himmel Street with the key. Notice, do you see how that's Mein Kampf? You can see the text of the book showing through the paint. This is really clever, people. Really thoughtful how they did this. They're trying. It's interesting to see this little all these illustrations like this. I slept there for a long time, 3 days, they told me. And what did I find when I woke up? Not a man, but someone else standing over me. As time passed by, the girl and I realized we had things in common. Now there's a picture of them down in the basement where they practice, where has always had to do her writing, her practice words on the wall, painted on the wall as she learns to read. And what do they have in common? Train, dreams, fists. They both rode a train to get there. They both have nightmares, and they fight. They have a history of fighting. But there is one strange thing. The girl says, I look like something else. The feathers, his hair is feathers. He looks like a bird, so that's what he sees in the mirror. Now I live in a basement. Bad dreams still live in my sleep. One night after my usual nightmare, a shadow stood above me. She said, tell me what you dream of. So I did. And what's he dreaming of? He's dreaming of the people he left behind. The people he feels guilty for having left behind. The people he didn't turn around and say goodbye to. And that haunts him. And notice through that door is peering himself and the girl. Him is the bird and her. And they're looking at his dream together. In return, she explained what her own dreams were made of. So she's telling him about her dreams. Now I think we are friends, this girl and me. On her birthday, it was she who gave a gift to me. And that shows her hugging him. It makes me understand that the best standover man I've ever known is not a man at all. Valuable. There's those words written on the wall. Valuable, valuable, valuable. Written as if they were being practiced their spelling. Daylight, water, movement, daylight, daylight. Under the stairs. She is his best standover man. In late February, when Liesel woke up in the early hours of morning, a figure made its way into her bedroom. Typical of Max, it was as close as possible to a noiseless shadow. Liesel, searching through the dark, could only vaguely sense the man coming toward her. "Hello?" There was no reply. There was nothing but the near silence of his feet as he came closer to the bed and placed the pages on the floor next to her socks. The pages crackled just slightly. One edge of them curled into the floor. "Hello?" This time there was a response. She couldn't tell exactly where the words came from. What mattered was that they reached her. They arrived and kneeled next to her bed. "A late birthday gift. Look in the morning. Good night." For a while she drifted in and out of sleep, not sure anymore whether she dreamed of Max coming in. In the morning when she woke and rolled over, she saw the pages sitting on the floor. She reached down and picked them up, listening to the paper as it rippled in her early morning hands. "All my life I've been scared of men standing over me." As she turned them, the pages were noisy, like static around a written story. 3 days, they told me, and what did I find when I woke up? There were the erased pages of Mein Kampf, gagging, suffocating under the paint as they turned. It makes me understand that the best standover man I've ever known. Liesel read and viewed Max Vandenberg's gift 3 times, noticing a different brush line or word with each one. When the 3rd reading was finished, she climbed as quietly as she could from her bed and walked to Mama's and Papa's room. The allocated space next to the fire was vacant. As she thought about it, she realized it was actually appropriate, or even better, perfect, to thank him where the pages were made. She walked down the basement steps. She saw an imaginary framed photo seep into the wall, a quiet, smiled secret. No more than a few meters, it was a long walk to the drop sheets and the assortment of paint cans that shielded Max Vandenberg. She removed the sheets closest to the wall until there was a small corridor to look through. The first part of him she saw was his shoulder, and through the slender gap, she slowly, painfully inched her hand in until it rested there. His clothing was cool. He did not wake. She could feel his breathing and his shoulder moving up and down ever so slightly. For a while she watched him. Then she sat and leaned back. Sleepy air seemed to have followed her. The scrawled words of practice stood magnificently on the wall by the stairs, jagged and childlike and sweet. They looked on as both the hidden Jew and the girl slept, hand to shoulder. They breathed. German and Jewish lungs. Next to the wall, the standover man sat, numb and gratified like a beautiful itch, at Liesel Memminger's feet. Isn't that interesting writing, people? Really nicely how they laid that out. That is just neat. Just neat. And I want to draw attention to this author's ability to depict things back on page 237 when he said about the words, what mattered, she couldn't exactly where the words came from in the middle of the page. What matters was that they reached her. They arrived and knelt next to the bed. His words knelt next to her. A late birthday gift. Look in the morning. And I love also, I noticed something else here. Near the bottom of the page, when where it says, she's reading the book. There were the erased pages of Mein Kampf. They've been painted over, gagging, suffocating under the paint as they turned. To think of the book gagging and suffocating, which is what you'd hope Mein Kampf would do. His making a book of it gagged Mein Kampf, which that's really an interesting way of verbalizing things. Okay. Let's see, where are we here? I'm going to keep going for a little while. Part 5, The Whistler, featuring a floating book, The Gambler's a Small Ghost, 2 haircuts, Rudy's Youth, Losers and Sketches, a Whistler and some Shoes, 3 Acts of Stupidity, and a Frightened Boy with Frozen Legs. The Floating Book, Part 1. Now, folks, anytime, of course, you can take a quick break and stop, but I'm going to go for about 30 minutes, okay? This is the first of 2 readings I want to do today. You guys, my goal, quite frankly, is I want to get, I would like to get this book done in the next couple of weeks. I don't want to wait until the end of the school year to get this book done. If we just all only read it in school, we're going to have a problem doing it. So I want to push forward. So I thank you for that. And this is a stormy weekend. You probably have other things to do. I realize you might have chores to do even. Some of you work, but still, it's still a good weekend. It's not really out and playing in the sun kind of a weekend. So I hope this works for you. The Floating Book, Part 1, page 241. A book floated down the Amper River. A boy jumped in, caught up to it, and held it in his right hand. He grinned. He stood waist-deep in the icy Decemberish water. "How about a kiss, Salmensch?" he said. "Oh, we know who this guy is. This is Rudy." The surrounding air was a lovely, gorgeous, nauseating cold, not to mention the concrete ache of the water, thickening from his toes to his hips. "How about a kiss? How about a kiss?" Poor Rudy. She's not going to kiss this guy. A small announcement about Rudy Steiner. He didn't deserve to die the way he did. Just crap, people. Just crap. Death is telling the story. So he's telling us, giving us an advance notice. In your visions, you see the sloppy edges of paper still stuck to his fingers. You see a shivering blonde fringe. Preemptively, you conclude, as I would, that Rudy died the very same day of hypothermia. He did not. Recollections like these merely remind me that he was not deserving of the fate that met him a little under 2 years later. On many counts, taking a boy like Rudy was robbery. So much life, so much to live for. Yet somehow I'm certain he would have loved to see the frightening rubble and the swelling of the sky on the night he passed away. He'd have cried and turned and smiled if only he could have seen the book thief on her hands and knees next to his decimated body. He'd have been glad to witness her kissing his dusty, bomb-hit lips. Yes, I know it. In the darkness of my dark beating heart, I know he'd have loved it all right. You see, even death has a heart. Well, people, now you know what's coming. Part of what's coming. Dang it. The Gamblers, a 7-sided die. You roll the die with 7 sides. That's unusual. Of course, I'm being rude. I'm spoiling the ending, not only of the entire book, but of this particular piece of it. I've given you 2 events in advance because I don't have much interest in building mystery. Mystery bores me. It chores me. I know what happens, and so do you. It's the machinations that wheel us there. It's the machinations that wheel us there that aggravate, perplex, interest, and astound me. There are many things to think of. There is much story. Certainly there's a book called The Whistler, which we really need to discuss, along with exactly how it came to be floating down the Amper River in the time leading up to Christmas 1941. We should deal with all of that first, don't you think? It's settled then. We will. It started with gambling. Roll a die by hiding a Jew, and this is how you live. This is how it looks. Here's die number 1. The haircut, mid-April 1941. Life was at least starting to mimic normality with more force. Hans and Rosa Huberman were arguing in the living room, even as it was much quieter than it used to be. Liesel, in typical fashion, was an onlooker. So they're still arguing, but a little quieter since Max moved in. Getting back to normal. An argument originated the previous night in the basement, where Hans and Max were sitting with paint cans, words, and drop sheets. Max asked if Rosa might be able to cut his hair at some stage. "It's getting me in the eyes," he'd said, to which Hans had replied, "I'll see what I can do." Now Rosa was riffling through the drawers. Her words were shoved back to Papa with the rest of the junk. "Where are those damn scissors?" "Not in the one below?" "I've been through that one already." "Maybe you missed them." "Do I look blind?" She raised her head and bellowed, "Liesel!" "I'm right here." Hans cowered. "God damn it, woman, deafen me, why don't you?" "Quiet, Sow Carol," Rosa went on, rifling and addressing the girl. "Liesel, where are the scissors?" But Liesel had no idea either. "Salmensch, you're useless, aren't you?" "Leave her out of it." More words were delivered back and forth from elastic-haired woman to silver-eyed man till Rosa slammed the drawer. "I'll probably make a lot of mistakes on him anyway." "Mistakes?" Papa looked ready to tear his own hair out by that stage, but his voice became a barely audible whisper. "Who the hell's going to see him?" He motioned to speak again. "Oh, let's see. I'm sorry. Okay. Max asked Rosa to cut his hair." Okay, I was thinking it was Hans. Max is the one that asked for a haircut. And, and so Hans asked the question, Who the hell's going to see him? So what if it's not a great haircut? Okay? He motioned to speak again, but was distracted by the feathery appearance of Max Vandenberg, who stood politely embarrassed in the doorway. He carried his own scissors and came forward, handing them not to Hans or to Rosa, but to the 12-year-old girl. She was the calmest option. His mouth quivered a moment before he said, "Would you?" Liesel took the scissors and opened them. They were rusty and shiny in different areas. She turned to Papa, and when he nodded, she followed Max down to the basement. The Jew sat on a paint can. A small drop sheet was wrapped around his shoulders. "As many mistakes as you want," he told her. Now that's kind of nice, because she's never done this before, and he's not saying, "Oh, don't make any mistakes," which, when you cut a hair, that's hard to do. It's easy to make mistakes. But he says, "As many mistakes as you want." Papa parked himself on the steps. Liesel lifted the first tuft of Max Vandenberg's hair. As she cut the feathery strands, she wondered at the sound of scissors, not the snipping noise, but the grinding of each metal arm as it cropped each group of fibers. When the job was done, a little severe in places, a little crooked in others, she walked upstairs with the hair in her hands and fed it into the stove. She lit a match and watched as the clump shriveled and sank, orange and red. Again, Max was in the doorway, this time at the top of the basement stairs. "Thanks, Liesel." His voice was tall and husky, with the sound in it of a hidden smile. No sooner had he spoken than he disappeared again, back into the ground. Die number 2. The newspaper, early May. "There's a Jew in my basement. There's a Jew in my basement." Sitting on the floor of the mayor's room full of books, Liesel Memminger heard those words. A bag of washing was at her side, and the ghostly figure of the mayor's wife was sitting hunch-drunk over at the desk. In front of her, Liesel read The Whistler, pages 22 and 23. She looked up. She imagined herself walking over, gently tearing some fluffy hair to the side and whispering in the woman's ear, "There's a Jew in my basement." As the book quivered in her lap, the secret sat in her mouth. It made itself comfortable. It crossed its legs. Interesting. The secret sits in her mouth and crosses its legs. It's just going to sit there. "I should be getting home." So she doesn't actually say it, but she thinks that she's saying it. "I should be getting home." This time she actually spoke. Her hands were shaking. Despite a trace of sunshine in the distance, a gentle breeze rode through the open window, coupled with rain that came in like sawdust. When Liesel placed the book back into position, the woman's chair stubbed the floor and made her way over. It was always like this at the end. The gentle rings of sorrowful wrinkles swelled a moment as she reached across and retrieved the book. She offered it to the girl. Liesel shied away. "No," she said, "thank you. I have enough books at home. Maybe another time. I'm rereading something else with my papa. You know, the one I stole from the fire that night." The mayor's wife nodded. If there was one thing about Liesel Memminger, her thieving was not gratuitous. She only stole books on what she felt was a need-to-have basis. Currently, she had enough. She'd gone through The Mudmen 4 times now and was enjoying her reacquaintance with The Shoulder Shrug. Also, each night before bed, she would open a full fail-safe guide to grave digging. Buried deep inside it, the Standover Man resided. She mouthed the words and touched the birds. She turned the noisy pages slowly. "Goodbye, Frau Hermann." She exited the library, walked down the floorboard hall and out a monstrous doorway. As was her habit, she stood for a while on the steps, looking at Molking beneath her. The town that afternoon was covered in a yellow mist, which stroked the rooftops as if they were pets and filled up the streets like a bath. When she made it down to Munich Street, the book thief seemed to swerved in and out of the umbrellaed men and women, a rain-cloaked girl who made her way without shame from one garbage can to another, like clockwork. There. She laughed up at the coppery clouds, celebrating before reaching in and taking the mangled newspaper. Although the front and back pages were streaked with black tears of print, she folded it neatly in half and tucked it under her arm. It had been like this each Thursday for the past few months. Thursday was the only delivery day left for Liesel Memminger now, and it was usually able to provide some sort of dividend. She could never dampen the feeling of victory each time she found a Molking Express or any other publication. Finding a newspaper was a good day. It was a paper in which the crossword wasn't done. It was a great day. She would make her way home, shut the door behind her, and take it down to Max Vandenberg. Crossword, he would ask. Empty. Excellent. The Jew would smile as he accepted the package of paper and started reading in the rationed light of the basement. Often, Liesel would watch him as he focused on reading the paper, completed the crossword, and then started to reread it, front to back. With the weather warming, Max remained downstairs all the time. During the day, the basement door was left open to allow the small bay of daylight to reach him from the corridor. The hall itself was not exactly bathed in sunshine, but in certain situations, you take what you can get. Dower light was better than none, and they needed to be frugal. The kerosene had not yet approached a dangerously low level, but it was best to keep its usage to a minimum. Liesel would usually sit on some drop sheets. She would read while Max completed those crosswords. They sat a few meters apart, speaking very rarely, and there was really only the noise of turning pages. Often, she also left her books for Max to read while she was at school. When Max Huberman and Eric Vandenberg were ultimately united by music, Max and Liesel were held together by the quiet gathering of words. The quiet gathering of words. Isn't that a great phrase? Where the words come together on a page, it's quiet and you read them. That's how they gathered. Hi, Max. Hi, Liesel. They would sit and read. At times she would watch him. She decided that he could best be summed up as a picture of pale concentration. Beige-colored skin, a swamp in each eye, and he breathed like a fugitive, desperate yet soundless. It was only his chest that gave him away for something alive. Increasingly, Liesel would close her eyes and ask Max to quiz her on the words she was continually getting wrong, and she would swear if they still escaped her. She would then stand and paint those words on the wall, anywhere up to a dozen times. Together, Max Vandenberg and Liesel Memminger would take in the odor of paint fumes and cement. Bye, Max. Bye, Liesel. In bed, she would lie awake, imagining him below in the basement. In her bedtime visions, he always slept fully clothed, shoes included, just in case he needed to flee again. He slept with one eye open. Let's see here. You guys, I'm going to, let me read to the bottom of the next page, and then I'm going to stop. The Weatherman, mid-May. Liesel opened the door and her mouth simultaneously. On Himmel Street, her team had trounced Rudy's 6-1, and triumphant, she burst into the kitchen, telling Mom and Papa all about the goal she'd scored. She then rushed down to the basement to describe it blow by blow to Max, who put down his newspaper and intently listened and laughed with the girl. When the story of the goal was complete, there was silence for a good few minutes, and Max looked up slowly. Would you do something for me, Liesel? Still excited by her Himmel Street goal, the girl jumped from the drop sheets. She did not say it, but her movement clearly showed her intent to provide exactly what he wanted. You told me all about the goal, he said, but I don't know what sort of a day it is up there. I don't know if you scored it in the sun or if the clouds have covered everything. His hand prodded at his short cropped hair, and his swampy eyes pleaded for the simplest of simple things. Could you go up and tell me how the weather looks? Naturally, Liesel hurried up the stairs. She stood a few feet from the spit-stained door and turned on the spout, observing the sky. When she returned to the basement, she told him, The sky is blue today, Max, and there's a big, long cloud, and it's stretched out like a rope. At the end of it, the sun is like a yellow hole. Max, at that moment, knew that only a child could have given him a weather report like that. On the wall, he painted a long, tightly knotted rope and a dripping yellow sun at the end of it, as if you could dive right into it. On the ropey cloud, he drew two figures, a thin girl and a withering Jew, and they were walking, arms balanced, toward that dripping sun. Beneath the picture, he wrote the following sentence. The wall-written words of Max Vandenberg. It was a Monday, and they walked on a tightrope to the sun. Okay, I'm going to stop reading there, people. We will pick up on page 250, the next recording. Thanks, you guys. Talk to you later.